One of the best young Jets defensemen might be back sooner than expected. Welcome news in a season that currently looks fraught with uncertainty.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Thanks for joining us on tonight's show. We have a lot to chat about, some interesting little comments from some Jets media, but the most important thing is, according to a legal curve, Elias Salomonsson might be back sooner than expected. Salo was obviously dealing with some off-season surgery stuff, and so, there was a big question about when he might be ready to return to duty. There was a thought that he would actually miss maybe the first couple of weeks of the season. But now it seems like he might even be ready as soon as camp or even preseason. Obviously there's no rush to get him back into the lineup, but for a team that still wants to win games and is still very much trying to field the best lineup it can, Salomonsson kind of has to be a part of the team. He is one of the Jets' best right side guys. He is a huge part of this Jets' future core, and having him back would be a big boost on the Jets' defense and even their puck movement offensively. We'll talk about that potential change and when we can sort of expect him back, as well as a conversation about a Hellebuyck holdout, what that would mean, and why the Jets really can't let it get there, as well as thoughts ahead of a big pivotal training camp and preseason. But first, let's start out with the really good news. Salomonsson might be ready for the start of the season. And for a Jets team that, quite frankly, just needs more young talent, Salomonsson is one of the guys that the team has really prioritized among a lot of the other prospects. We saw him last year get more of a look than I think we've seen any other defensive prospect since Sandberg get. And I know that doesn't sound all that crazy or impressive, but it's a really big deal for Salomonsson. Elias has obviously been one of our most hyped prospects ever. I think he has at times been the #1 prospect in the system. Pierre-luc obviously takes that crown now. And so, we are kind of moving Salo to #2 or maybe even #3, depending on where you rank him. I still think he's probably our second best prospect. I have always been a big fan of him, and I think the way that he has hit North American ice just continues to look really impressive. He had a monster AHL debut season. His first real Jet season where he actually got minutes last year looked really impressive. There were games where, yes, he did struggle, and it wasn't just him. Usually you saw some issues with some of the other Jets lines as well. As for when Salo might come back, it is kind of looking like maybe camp, maybe preseason, maybe the start of the year. I'm honestly not in a super big rush to get him back. As important as he can be, I think the Jets would be wise to not rush and re-aggravate an injury. Especially if the team wants to be competitive this year, Salomonsson being healthy would be really, really important. One thing that I think we really saw with him last year was that he was very helpful when DeMello was starting to slow down. I love Didi, right? Dylan has been one of this team's most I would say reliable defenseman, one of the guys that's been a leader on and off the ice, but you can kind of tell he's in his early to mid 30s. And I think the foot speed thing, we've talked about that kind of being an issue. It's clear that it is definitely starting to catch up. And so it's really important that Salomonsson is as good to go and as ready to go as he possibly can. And that, will he be ready to go early enough to have a major impact on the start of the season? I don't know. I wouldn't want to read too much into it just yet, but I think the fact that he might be ahead of schedule is really positive. This is just good news. No matter how you slice it, this is exactly the kind of thing that this Jets team needs going forward. Winnipeg doesn't have a lot of other young defensemen right now who are ready to step into NHL roles. I do have time for Garrett Brown. He's another guy that I very patiently watched, kind of tracking his Denver progress, kind of seeing how he did. I thought his first couple of Moose games looked really, really solid. He's a pretty solid defensively minded guy. He's got good two-way transition. He skates with the puck well. He's a physically big dude, right? Like he's Sandberg size. I've always kind of called him Sandberg on the right side, and I think that's really the assessment that I generally stick with. Do I think he's got a little more offensive jump? Maybe. But so far, you're probably looking at more of a third pairing guy, whereas Salomonsson, right now is definitely a top 4 option. Whatever Corey Pronman had about him being more of a third pairing guy, no, I'm sorry. That's just wrong. Like, all due respect to Pronman, no. Salomonsson has clearly been one of our most exciting and best puck moving D. He's a guy that I've always had time for. And so having him back earlier into the season would be a godsend. This team could definitely manage without him for the first few weeks, but I think it would be much, much, much more preferable to have our young gun. And honestly, the more ice time that Salomonsson gets at the NHL level, the more he can earn the trust of the coaches, the more he can continue to demonstrate and show that he is really our future 1D on the right side. Now, is he a 1D by other standards? I don't know, right? The Jets don't have that many choices to choose from. So maybe he would be a second pairing guy on an elite contender. I don't really care. He is our best option right now. He is the guy that I think, at least for the next year or two, will be the dude that you want to play with Morrissey. I don't know who else you would choose. DeMello probably can't do it. We know that Pionk is really not a suitable first pairing option. Salomonsson is kind of the guy by default. And I think if you put him with Morrissey, that's probably your best chance to get this team a little more up-tempo offense. So fantastic news. Really hoping for a good and healthy recovery. Cross your fingers for no re-aggravations, no other injuries. And if he stays healthy, I think Salomonsson could be a really helpful presence at 5v5. And I do think he's got some power play jump. I do wonder at what point we might start to see him more on the special teams unit. I don't recall him getting a ton of time there last year, but I've watched him with some of the Moose. He's got really smart offensive instincts, especially attacking kind of the middle of the ice and attacking the face-off circles. There is very clearly a guy who likes to get the puck on goal. We saw that at even strength with him, a lot. He is a good skater. He handles the puck well, and he's got pretty good shooting. It didn't result in, too many points last year, but I do think that in a Jets team that's got maybe more talent, more speed, a guy like Salomonsson might really start to profit. So this year could be a really fun one for him. I'm very excited for his potential. He is a guy that I have continued to really, I would say, highlight as a future piece of the Jets core. Is he on the level of a Bjerg? Maybe not. Right? He might not be a guy that you call a future franchise cornerstone. Bjerg has that potential. He's not there yet, obviously. He hasn't even played in North America yet, so we're not going to say that that's where he is right now in his career. But down the road, this whole Swedish push that we've got, these young Swedes that continue to really impress in the Jets system, I've got all the time in the world for Winnipeg. We've got more on the way, whether it's Boumedienne, Frey, or even Klingso. We've got some probably other Swedish prospects eventually that'll be drafted. I think the Jets have clearly started to recruit from that area. Hopefully it turns into a lot of NHLers, but Salomonsson is already an NHLer. I'm excited about him. It's good to hear that he's getting healthier, and that is a really good piece of news because there is starting to be some conversation on social media about Hellebuyck, and that might temper some of the expectations for the season. I want to talk about some of those conversations and where they might lead coming right up. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or just checking in on the day's matchups. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. If you think Guerrero Jr. can help the Blue Jays make the playoffs, this is your chance to capitalize on his next big grand slam. Maybe there's a home run in his future, maybe 3. This is your chance to make the most of the opportunity. Are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences at FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for rejoining us as we are chatting a little bit about the Jets in Hellebuyck, right? Now, a lot of people have kind of been upset about Hellebuyck conversations beating a dead horse. I get it, right? It's a little hard to avoid, though, when he is one of the most important players on the team. He is the franchise superstar, and so anything that comes up with him, it's just a big deal. And I think, in particular, for the upcoming season and beyond, whatever happens with Hellebuyck kind of decides Winnipeg's fate. Hellebuyck staying would be a very big thing for the Jets' competitiveness, but also kind of kicks the can down the road for the much longer-term conversations about where this Jets' future goes. If Hellebuyck gets traded, obviously the whole season landscape changes. We probably see a different roster heading into the season start. We might have a different lineup. There could be a number of different ways it goes down. But one scenario that has started to pop up, and not Mike McIntyre, another Jets reporter or former Jets reporter started talking about it a little bit. Scott Billick, he was kind of having these thoughts about, when do we start hearing about a Hellebuyck holdout? And I've talked about the holdout thing before. A camp holdout starts to put a lot of pressure on everyone involved. And for me personally, I've had a lot of thoughts about Hellebuyck potentially holding out. For one, I hope it doesn't really have to get to that point. A holdout, I don't think really helps too many parties other than Helly. And even for Helly, this could make things a little uncomfortable for his next team. I've seen some folks say, well, he can just sit. And I understand why people might think that, especially with the Jets having him under contract for 5 years. My concern is that he starts to become a depreciating asset, right? He's 33. He's got a 5-year deal, but he has a 10-team trade list that kicks in next summer. Teams know this, especially the ones that want to bring him on. They also know that he's probably got not many destinations he's willing to accept a trade to. A holdout starts to put real pressure on a move to go through. Now, you can let him sit 100%. That is a complete option the Jets have. I think where I start to get worried is, he's already 33. How much time can he afford to miss before his trade value basically becomes negligible? How much of the season is he willing to stay out? What does a not report look like for not only the training camp sessions, but also for the season? How will that impact the room? There's a lot of dynamics here, including relationships and a lot of the team's tactical planning that a Hellebuyck holdout would really impact. And, in terms of the trade value, it would probably crater it as well. This is a situation that I just don't think the Jets can let happen. If it does, obviously it becomes a huge distraction. I think, you can look at some of the comments from the Jets on his statements about the progress of the team and the direction it's going. It seems like not that many people are happy. Morrissey, I thought, did a really good job of not throwing Helly under the bus, while also sort of acknowledging that there's kind of a time crunch for this group, right? They're in their 30s, and Helly is no different. And after tasting Olympic gold, the Jets are very clearly not a team that has a particularly winning future ahead of them. Folks can sort of debate that and say that it was just a blip last year. The truth is, time comes for everyone, and I think that's been the case for the Jets. Hellebuyck has generally resisted a lot of the typical age-related decline. Goalies in general age pretty gracefully, but he had his first surgery, a knee surgery, that may have an impact on his future performance. Scheifele has, put up some monster numbers last year, the biggest points total we've ever seen from him in his career. But he's doing that also at around 32, 33. What are the next couple of years for him like? Will he continue to defy the aging curve? Will he still put up crazy points? Will he put up more? Obviously, most people expect him to put up most likely less points this upcoming season. I'm not mad about that. Like, if he drives play better, I don't really care, right? If he actually controls play like a 1C and doesn't just score like one, that's great for me. I'm totally satisfied with that. But you're betting on a lot of things that typically don't happen. And so, a lot of teams will look at this whole Hellebuyck situation. They'll look at his future projections. They'll look at other goalie comparables. And I just think that if you get to a holdout situation heading into the start of the season, it's just not good for anyone, right? And I worry that if he does hold out, it could start to cascade into some other stuff. Do other players start to get pissed off? I don't know what the reaction was across the board. I think some guys probably did not like Hellebuyck's comments because, well, he did kind of throw the team under the bus. Was he right to? I think he was correct in his overall assessment. I think he probably should have focused a little bit more on some of his own performances as well. But we know that he has, at least at times, pulled apart his own games in some instances. Overall, though, like his net conclusion was right. I don't really take issue with that. But I do worry, what all of this is going to lead to, right? Will it snowball into a situation the Jets can't control? Will this become a runaway train? Will it start to lead to any sort of requests other than Hellebuyck? Guys are thinking about their long-term futures. They're trying to figure out where they fit in the grand scheme of things and where this team is headed competitively. And it just doesn't seem like there's too much moving in a good direction right now. The Jets, at least heading into the summer, talked a big game. I don't know that we've really seen a lot that shows a big commitment and demonstration of that commitment to winning or planning for the future. It seems like they've done some things around both, but not a lot. And, their summer, I've argued, sets them better for the future, but it also requires them to do more on the back end to make sure that the prospect pipeline and development plan actually turns into graduated prospects. We haven't really seen a lot of that, at least publicly. In terms of trading for players to help Hellebuyck be convinced to stay, Winnipeg hasn't really done that either. So what realistically are we doing this offseason? What is the plan? What is the vision? There was a fan poll put out earlier, and Jets fans were pretty harsh on the team. Kind of hard to argue with them. And, the vision got a poor grade. Free agency got a poor grade. I'm okay with free agency sucking, to be honest. I don't want the Jets spending a lot there. But in terms of trades, roster building, vision, communication, all that stuff, it seems like Winnipeg is not being regarded fondly by the Jets fan base. And I think that's right. A Hellebuyck holdout might start to put even more pressure on this front office to communicate something, to give us something to latch onto, because it just seems like the more that they try and avoid the problems here, the worse all of this is going to get once you head into the season. So all that to say, I really hoped that we wouldn't reach this point, and we're still not there yet, but the countdown is ticking, right? The clock is moving. We have to figure out what Hellebuyck's future is, and they have to do it very fast. If they head into camp and into the season with this turning into a huge, embarrassing train wreck, it could have some really long standing ramifications for the team's image in the league. It could have some really serious impacts on the room. It could have some impacts in the organization. This is a seismic potential standoff, and it would just be really helpful if the Jets try to get ahead of that. Do your best to avoid the situation. If you can't, it is what it is. But this is a time where the Jets need to make sure that they have everything in order if it gets to the stage. A standoff over the direction of the team and the trade request, it benefits Helly more than it benefits anyone, but I don't think anyone, including the team itself, walks away happy with the situation. Would love to know your thoughts, though. How do you feel about a Hellebuyck holdout? Are you worried about it? Is it something that you're not panicking about? I know a lot of people have said we're not hearing anything, we're not seeing anything, and sure, that is technically the truth on paper, but we've heard Friedman kind of talk about some stuff heating up towards camp, being a potential situation. You could read it as just trade conversations, or you could also read that he has heard that Hellebuyck is willing to push more buttons to make this deal happen. As of right now, he is still unconvinced about the direction of the team, and that hasn't really wavered since he initially wanted out. So we might have to buckle up, because the next few weeks heading into September could be really crazy in Jets land. The Hellebuyck thing, has sort of been simmering for a while. It's been on the back burner, but it is starting to get closer and closer to the point where you can no longer avoid the conversation. Now, speaking of countdowns, obviously preseason and camp are right around the corner. I want to chat about what I'm hoping for this year, and what I think the Jets really need to show heading into camp as we start getting closer and closer, because it does seem like the Jets are keyed in on some aspects of this Jets future, but not enough publicly. We'll talk about that coming right up. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for rejoining us on tonight's closing thoughts as we're just wrapping with some quick thoughts ahead of the Jets training camp and preseason, which is coming up. This is a really big evaluation period. I've mentioned that before, especially with respect to the prospects. But I also think for the Jets front office, this needs to be a put up or shut up moment with who is actually driving the bus. You know, the lineup combinations that we've seen over the years, the continued duos that have really been almost inseparable. Some of these are clear signs that it's not just the Jets coaching staff and front office that are making calls. You know, there is some serious loyalty to certain players. Some guys really get their way. And for the health of the team and really the direction of the team, some of that is going to have to change. Last year should have been a really humbling moment for a lot of the squad. I'm not sure that it was. You know, I suspect there was some defiance. I suspect there are players on the team who don't really think this team was as bad as it was. And I can understand that. You know, from an ice level perspective, they're all fighting their hardest. They're doing their best. But at some point, you're going to have to reckon with the fact that what you put out last year was basically like one line scoring and praying that it was enough to carry the team through the rest of the evening. And I'm sure there are guys on the team who know that. I'm sure it was frustrating. But now you have to really reckon with the fact that the team itself hasn't changed a ton. You made some additions through subtraction. You've brought in Viggo Bjork. You may have one or two other prospects vying for some ice time, but probably not that many opportunities for competition. So if you go back to a vet-heavy lineup this year, you can probably expect some of the problems you had last season. Bjork will help a lot, I think, at least that's my hope. But, you know, how much can you really hope for him to do in his rookie season? Asking him to be the Elite 2C immediately, yeah, that would be amazing. It might really change Winnipeg's season fortunes, but it is a lot to put your hat on. As much as I love the kid, he's got to have some room to grow and succeed and fail in equal measure. You know, obviously you'd like him to succeed, but he is a teenager entering the toughest league in hockey. That might be an initially steep learning curve. It is for most prospects that are coming through these days. There are very few teenagers who hit the NHL right now and immediately thrive. Bjork may be able to be one of those guys, but if he's not, the Jets are going to have some real conversations about where they get the rest of the scoring and offense from. This team doesn't have much past the top line, and if the second line isn't clicking, you don't have much else in your bottom six either. This is why preseason and camp really have to be the experimentation moments. You cannot go back to the same combinations that have been your standbys for the last several years. CSV can do it against softer opponents, but the moment it starts to get really tough against really good opponents, you see their limitations. CSI had a really fun run at times against the Blues and at times in the year prior to last, but last season, it seemed like Iafallo took a step back. And with CS kind of struggling defensively in its own right, that trio just didn't have the same jump that I think a lot of us were hoping for. You're going to have to figure something out because if Connor and Scheifele want to keep playing together, well, they're going to need a winger that can do more of the defensive duties and help keep the puck in the offensive zone for them. Otherwise, you know, your top line becomes a little bit one note. And the Jets just can't afford that. They really have to have some more dynamics. They have to have more matchup ability. And the way that they're currently structured and how they've been doing things the last few years hasn't given them as many opportunities to do that. It makes me wonder, you know, heading into this camp and preseason, will Arniel flex his muscles? I talked about this being a really important time for him to have full command of the locker room and to be able to make really tough calls and have them stick. And we haven't really heard a lot about it, right? It's been a sort of quietly murmured about thing. You've seen some people sort of talking about Arniel mid-game making adjustments and then not committing to it. You've seen some fans talking about it, but, you know, where does that all lead? Will he have more authority to make those firm handprints on the team this year? Will he have the chance to really send messages, or will we see more of the same that has kind of been the hallmark of the Jets of the last several years? I think this season feels like a powder keg. This could be a really big moment where the franchise either recognizes a lot of the you know, misplaced loyalties or where they've let things get a little bit too complacent, or they keep going down the same road that they have the last several years. I don't know where I stand on this, right? I don't know, you know, how much this team acknowledges its own struggles. They don't really communicate a lot about that. They've said some broad things, but then, you know, have the actions really back that up? Not so far, right? And whatever internal review they had didn't really seem to change or shake much up, at least on the personnel side. Yes, they were super thrilled about Bjork. They're talking about playing him a lot, but beyond that, who else do you think they've really celebrated? We heard a mention maybe of Jaeger. We heard some conversations about maybe Salomonsson once he's healthy, but beyond that, it doesn't really seem like the Jets intend to do too much to shake the formula up. And for a formula that has by and large just been regular season success focused, I don't know, man. It just feels like the Jets are sort of pedaling along into the same routines, and I worry that they're not going to recognize in time what they need to do to get to that next stage of competition. It's been a continual conversation, whether it's trade deadlines, off seasons, or even the starts of the seasons. Winnipeg is still trying to scrap together from the same pool of opportunities and plans it's had ever since the 17-18 season. At some point, they're going to have to try and change the direction of the ship. If they don't, I guess it is what it is. They're probably going to be moving more towards like top 10 pick territory, but maybe not the top kinds of picks that they truly need. Winnipeg kind of needs lottery talents. There's no other getting around it. That is where this team is at. That is where it is going to start to push towards as the rest of the group gets older. The Jets are slowly running out of time, and I don't know if they're prepared for what that starts to look like when the bill comes due. It's already come due in some ways already, but there is more to come if the Jets continue down this road of kicking the can continually. I know why they don't want to do it. And I know why they keep opting for the kick the can down the road approach, but at some point you're going to run out of the ability to keep kicking that can. It's going to hit a bit of a wall, and I think the Jets are rapidly approaching that wall as we start to get closer and closer to the ends of a lot of these veteran careers. So it's a really, really big evaluation period coming up. This coming preseason and camp, if the Jets aren't willing to really lean on the youth and give them a true fighting chance, I just don't know when they ever will. This team is really at the bottom of what it's capable of. Their ceiling has passed. It is time to turn over the reins before it is too late. But let me know what you think you'll see in preseason and camp. Are you hopeful the Jets will actually change, or do you think they're going to do the same things that they've done the last several years? Drop your thoughts in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at @Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. Thanks for listening. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.